Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday, February 26, 2020 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Service Agency, and Placer County Local Transportation Authority. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, would the clerk please call the roll?
Baker. Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Holmes.
Here.
Housefeldt. Joyner.
Here.
Mackey. Here. Bueller. Wright. Here.
Thank you. We'll move to item C, closed session. We'll be moving to conference room A. This is conference with legal counsel for existing litigation, paragraph 1 of subdivision D of Government Code section 54956.9. Name of case, Sierra Club versus Caltrans PCTPA, Sacramento Superior Court. All right, we are bringing the open section back to order. As for the closed session, we have no items to report. We'll move on to item D, approval of action minutes for the January 22nd, 2020 meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We will move to item E, agenda review. Does anybody have any items they would like moved or pulled on the agenda? All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, we'll move to item F, public comment. This is the time when any member of the public can comment on any items that are not currently on the agenda. Do we have any public comment? No? All right, we will move from public comment to item G, the consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, move to item H, Federal Legislative Program for 2020.
Morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Item you have before you today is our annual request for the board to consider and approve our federal legislative program for 2020 as it relates to our primary mission. The two recommended actions is that you adopt the program as shown in the report and then direct staff and federal advocates to represent these positions, including travel to Washington, D.C. In quick summary, the federal agenda essentially remains the same. We reviewed our agenda with other agencies, mainly the county and the city of Roseville, who have active governmental affairs programs to make sure that our agendas are consistent, and they are. And because of the lack of progress that the federal government has had in putting forth a infrastructure bill. We're kind of still in a wait and see mode as we have been for the last few years. So we're very closely monitoring what is going on with those two programs, as well as changes in the infra and build programs, and we'll remain in that monitoring mode until something happens more substantially. There is movement. Again, we see this every year. There's a flurry of activity and not a lot happens, but as we get closer to the Federal Highway Trust Fund running out of dollars, they seem to act a little more in a little more haste. And so as we get closer to that, we will make recommendations to you if they're different from what's in this program. A couple highlights in the legislative agenda that may be a little bit different is there is a new routes initiative program that is a special part of infrastructure program put forth by the administration to fund projects in rural areas. We actually have provided comments to the U.S. Department of Transportation on this program. Essentially, the current routes initiative would not allow any jurisdiction in Placer County to apply for that because it's only for jurisdictions with less than 100,000 in population. So we've asked them for a little more flexibility in administering that program. So we've submitted that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention before we answer questions that the board may have is one of the things in getting our projects ready in the future for a potential infra or build application. It is imperative that we seek partnerships with other jurisdictions outside Placer County. And so in the past, we've had a relationship with Washoe County and Northern Nevada, and it was very successful in getting projects funded along Interstate 80. We are asking the board to allow us to renew that relationship and working very closely with the county, with Placer County, to implement that new relationship. In the potential of maybe in 2021, if they have projects of similar nature along Interstate 80, there could be a potential for a joint infra or build or some other program that we don't know about right now to work with Washoe County to do that. We also have in here a continued working with SACOG and their efforts with the mega region initiative that is going to restart with earnest this year. So we're kind of looking in both directions for potential partners for future grant applications, both to Nevada and to SACOG and the Bay Area. So with that, I'll conclude, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the federal program. I should note that our federal lobbyist remains the same with Sante Esposito with key advocates.
Beautiful. Do we have any questions from the board?
I have one question. In the partnership with Washoe County and the state of Nevada, will you also be reaching out to Nevada County, who holds territory, I guess, in that boundary as well, and the NCTC, and forging maybe a partnership with them as well?
Absolutely, we would both Nevada County and FERPA and all of our partners up in the Tahoe area.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Anything else from the board? Do we have any comment from the public? All right.
Move to adopt the federal legislative program as shown in the report. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, moving on to item I, State Legislative Program for 2020.
Likewise, its companion, our state legislative program. We're asking the board to bless our state legislative program for 2020 as shown in this report. There's not a lot of changes in terms of actual programs. We continue to participate in a number of those, and so it's a very modest change in what we had forecast in 2019. Having said that, we asked Mark Watts, our state lobbyist, to come join us this morning, and he's going to give a brief update on things state transportation-wise.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here today. I've got a couple things I'll quickly run through. First is changes at the CTC, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the competitive grant programs. I'll be very brief on those that are in order, but there's some special note that needs to go along with that part of the discussion. I'll give you a brief update on the state budget and close with comments about the TDA Act program. So first on the CTC, we're seeing a sea change potentially sweep in at this point in time. There are 11 members that vote at the commission, 9 appointed by the governor, 2 that are appointed by legislative leaders. There are 2 expiring or expired already, but they get to continue in office till they're replaced. From the governor's side, 1 that had been a governor's appointment made in the fall has resigned, so there's a potential for 3 appointments by Governor Newsom, and there's a requirement that they consider the diversity of policy backgrounds that didn't used to be there, so I think we're going to see a shift in the types of expertise on the commission, probably the best way to say it. In addition, the 2 slots that were appointees of the pro tem and the speaker, One slot had been filled by Commissioner Christine Kehoe. She had been in the speaker slot. She was appointed by Speaker Atkins when Speaker Atkins was speaker and not pro tem. And then later, the pro tem's person vacated to go to the High-Speed Rail Commission. So Commissioner Christine Kehoe has been appointed to the Senate slot. Now there's a vacancy on the Assembly slot. So we actually have potential for slots to fill, which I think is almost unprecedented in my 35 years of working with the commission. So it's worth noting. We don't have to worry about it, but I just want to put that on the table in case you see. And I think one adjustment that I think your staff has made is getting very close to the governor's new administration, particularly Secretary Kim and his operation and the director's office. I think that's going to stand in good stead as we try to figure out the uncertainty around the commission. Secondly, the competitive grant programs that flowed out of SB1, which is the local partnership program, the congested corridors program, the trade corridor, and frankly, to a degree, the STIP program. They're all in mid-course in preparing to have finalized guidelines and call for projects. One thing I would note that Luke and I spent an ungodly amount of hours in December trying to make sure that the proposal by the commission staff to announce potential award winners next October, just before the election, was not adopted, and we were successful. We got that moved for those major awards to December, when we finally impressed upon them the political need for self-help counties around the state to not have conflicting information flowing from the commission. So that was a very good job, and count that as a success. The budget, the state budget, this year compared to the last year is very straightforward. It continues the full amount of SB1 funds. This year, the SB1 funds are estimated to be about $5.4 billion, which is an increase of about $300 million over the last budget cycle. The other notable aspect of it is that the SB1 proposal last year to use the SB1 withhold of local partnership funds or local streets and roads funds as a penalty for cities and counties not meeting arena goals that kind of activity is not shown anywhere in the budget. There is no linking SB1 to other policy agendas by the governor. Now, we have the budget subcommittee process kicking off, so we'll be watching and monitoring that very closely and see how that goes. And finally, the TDA program, which you're very familiar with because you're taking actions today related to it, dates back to 1970 and 71. A lot of the regulations, if you walk into a Caltrans Mass Transit Division, they've got books that thick that have all the regulations in them. Really hasn't been updated and modernized. And so both chairs of the transportation committees asked the California Transit Association last summer to take a fresh look at the TDA, both the LTF side, the Local Transportation Fund, quarter-cent sales tax side, and the State Transit Assistance side, and come back with recommendations. They have done that. They were making some recommendations with respect to fare box, maybe a little more flexible, and maybe taking away punishment aspects, penalty aspects. But the two chairs asked for the material to be returned and have another quick review of that. So that's still in mid-process. I'm monitoring that very closely, as I'm sure every small and large transportation and transit agency in the state. So we'll see how that works out. But one thing we were looking out for had been the thought of a proposal that would have minimize the amount that a transportation planning agency can use for planning purposes. And that is not on the table at this point in time, so what we'll be watching for is that that doesn't pop up again. So with that, I conclude my report and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Madam Chair. Thank you, Mark. Did you say the SB1 funds in the state budget are $5.4 billion?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the CTC, is Mr. Travaglione still on that?
Yes, he is. I believe his term goes through 2021.
Oh, okay. All right. Give him my regards.
I will. Best commissioner ever, so
Right.
I'm partial.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else from the board? Do we have any comments from the public? Seeing none, I will move back for a motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Moving on to item J, preliminary draft for year 2020 and 2021 overall work program and budget.
Good morning, Chair Barris and members of the board. I'll be handling this item. You should have a document. It's the 2020-2021 overall work program and budget. And this is going to begin, of course, July 1st, 2020. And the work program really reflects work that we've been doing for a number of years. And I've had a graphic put up on the screen here that just shows some of the regional projects that we've been working on. And we're kind of getting to a point where we're ready to move into construction on a lot of these projects. And so the overall work program reflects that, a focus on pre-construction activities. And the first two projects are the Highway 65 widening Phase 1 and the I-80 auxiliary lanes. Those are both in 95% design right now. And those are work elements 42 and 43. And construction could begin on those two, could begin on all these projects if we, of course, had a local source of transportation funding. The third project is Placer Parkway Phase 1. That's work element 40. We also have Riego Road Baseline Road widening, work element 47. And we have an ambitious schedule that we brought to you last time to start construction on that 12-mile long project by 2022. We have the State Route 49 Sidewalk Gap Closure Project. That's work element 44. That's up here in Auburn, Placer County. That is a fully funded project through Senate Bill 1, Active Transportation Program, and that's anticipated to start construction in 2022. And then the sixth project you see up here is the Interstate 80 Highway 65 interchange, and we would like to start moving forward on Phase 2. We currently have both state and federal environmental approval for that project, and so if we began design in late 2020, we could start construction in 2023. Of course, some of the success that we had is in work element 41. That's Phase 1 of the Interstate 80 Highway 65 interchange. Of course, that was completed 4 months ahead of schedule in September of 2019 and under the $50 million budget. But we'll be working on closing out that project with Caltrans, and so that's why you still see that work element in there. Then we have the Regional Transportation Funding Strategy, work element 60, which of course Mike and several of our staff have been working on diligently. We are going to transition because come May of 2020, we're going to go into full education mode. We've been in education mode, but we're going to create a new work element, and that's Regional Transportation Funding Program. That's work element 61, and that's where a lot of those efforts will go. And then we are beginning a new planning effort, and this is work element 46. This is the Placer Sacramento Action Plan, which Kathleen Hanley of our staff is heading up, and this is to identify multimodal projects. You kind of heard a little bit of what Mark Watts just mentioned. The state is changing. I think a lot of the more business-friendly CTC commissioners are leaving, and we're getting a more advocacy type commissioners, and they're really interested in transit, bike, and ped, and they want you out of your car. And the reality is what we're doing is we're just catering to what they want. And we're going to put forward projects. We do bike, ped, and transit in Placer County. We're just going to put more of those projects forward and highlight them more to the CTC. And so the action plan is going to work with 14 agencies across Sacramento and Placer County and figure out what are these multimodal, regionally significant projects that are going to be able to compete with the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And that's really the effort there. And that's looking at cycle 3 for grants in 2022. And of course, any of those projects, even bike, ped, and transit, are going to require a 50% match from a local source of funding. So keep that in mind also. Staffing levels do remain the same with 7 full-time equivalent staff. And of course, I'm pleased to say that we have a balanced budget just slightly over $5 million. It is a 24% reduction from this year, 1920, because of 8065 Phase 1 with the completion there. And of course, David Melko of our staff was leading up the Placer-Sacramento Gateway Plan. We'll be wrapping that up in June. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? All right, do we have any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for motion.
Move approval. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Moving on to item K, congestion mitigation and air quality, project funding recommendations.
Good morning, this is my item. So we receive these congestion mitigation and air quality funds from the federal government due to the fact that we're in a non-attainment air quality zone for various pollutants. So we get these funds and PCTPA programs them in multi-year cycles. At the December board meeting, the board approved the guidelines for this round of funding, which is for fiscal years 2023 through 2025, and issued a call for projects. Agency staff submitted 10 applications in January, and those applications were reviewed by PCTPA staff against the guidelines approved by the board. And it was determined that all 10 applications are able to be funded and are within our funding amount and qualify for the congestion mitigation and air quality funds. So today the staff recommendation is for approval of the 10 projects. Together, these 10 projects are about $11.3 million, and they leverage more than $44 million. So they all have match from other funding sources. And I'm happy to take any questions about these funds.
Any questions from the board? All right, seeing none, do we have any comment from the public? Bring it back to the board for a motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Moving on to item L, unmet transit needs report and findings for year 2021.
This is my item as well. This will be the last item for unmet transit needs for this cycle, so we're almost there. As a reminder for any new folks in the room, as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for Placer County, one of PCTPA's main goals is to manage Transportation Development Act funds, which Mark Watts spoke a little bit about, are their state funds. It's a state-imposed sales tax, and it creates two statewide pots, State Transit Assistance, or STA, and the Local Transportation Fund, or LTF. Those LTF funds are then allocated down to PCTPA, and we allocate them to the cities, the town, and the county based on a combination of roadway miles and population. We received just under $22 million in local transportation fund in 2019, and this bar chart shows how those were allocated to the various jurisdictions. PCTPA does keep, it's a little cut off. PCTPA does keep just under $900,000, which helps fund our planning efforts and staff time. Because Placer County has a population less than 500,000, the state legislation allows those more rural counties to spend these local transportation fund dollars, which are chiefly intended for transit. We're allowed to spend them on local streets and roads projects. So this graph shows how the jurisdictions have chosen to spend their LTF dollars over the years. It's important to note that although there's been a decline in the percent of the LTF funds which are spent on transit, our transit operators have provided roughly the same level of revenue miles of service. And so that change in funding percentage can be attributed to a number of different things, other transit funding sources and just different budget decisions by the agencies. So every year we go through this unmet transit needs process as one of those agencies who uses some of the LTF funds for non-transit purposes. And essentially we're asking two questions. First, is the request that we get from the public for an unmet transit need, is it actually unmet? Is it not already fulfilled by our existing transit system? And if we were to fulfill it, would it be reasonable? Would it meet fare box? Is it affordable? Is there community support for it? And is it consistent with our previous planning efforts? Last year, if you'll remember, there was deemed an unmet transit need that was reasonable to meet, and that was for individuals who are unable to ride fixed route service between Lincoln and Rockland. And agency staff are working hard on implementing this, and we expect to see dial-a-ride for folks who are ADA eligible to be rolled out in the spring. So for 2020, we did a bunch of outreach, and I want to thank all of the members of the board and their staffs for their assistance in getting the word out about the unmet transit needs process. We received 347 total comments, which is a record, and these were received mostly through our online survey, which PCTPA continues to find is the most efficient way to outreach with the public. But we also did have an in-person workshop in Tahoe City, which we do jointly with Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and Nevada County. So once all those outreach comments were received in September and October, then it was analyzed over the winter time, and a draft report was in December. That draft report was then taken to the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council in January of this year, and here we are in February for board consideration of the recommended finding. There are a lot of comments, all of which are included in your report and are available on the PCTPA website, but I will say that there are 3 overall trends from previous years. The first is sort of an evergreen trend. We get a lot of requests for unmet transit needs service that exists already. A lot of folks saying, I want to go from here to there, and there is, sure enough, a bus or a dial-a-ride. And so marketing and transit outreach continues to be a big part of our effort here at PCTPA to address some of those concerns. The second, which is new from the previous year, is a lot of requests for intercity and intercounty service. For example, a lot of requests for folks wanting to go from Roseville to Folsom, or from South County up to Tahoe for weekend travel. And so just folks thinking of transit more in a long-range trip type capacity, where traditionally we used to get more comments for, I live here, the grocery store is on the other side of town, how do I get there? So it's just a change in how the requests are coming in. And then third, a lot of requests for non-work trips. Typically we think about transit as commute, but as I mentioned, a lot of folks asking for weekend Tahoe travel to get downtown for various events, the Downtown Commons, and Roseville providing a commute service for the Kings games. It's a good example of how we're trying to start to meet some of those non-work trip requests. So with those 347 comments, the staff recommendation is that none of them constitute unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, and we recommended that the unmet transit needs report for fiscal year 2019-2020 is accepted and complete. So I took this staff recommendation to the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council. We discussed all the comments and the trends just as I presented to you. The Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, we typically meet annually, though we've met more often before. And in addition to reviewing unmet transit needs comments, these folks who are advocacy and social service organizations provide a lot of great information on how transit really is working for their clients and for them as transit riders. So they added an additional recommendation that PCTPA staff should review microtransit and transportation network company Uber and Lyft programs. If you'll remember, in 2018, with the development of the short-range transit plans, these types of transit initiatives were looked into, and it was recommended that service in Granite Bay and parts of Roseville was what made most sense to implement this. However, there have been some new programs in the Sacramento region, SAC-RT's Smart Ride program, for example, or West Sacramento's VIA program. So staff is just going to check in with some of our regional partners and see how those programs are going to make sure there's no updated information from what was in the short-range transit plan. So the SSTAC recommendation is the recommendation that is in your staff report and is the recommended finding for today. So the next steps would be to receive public comment on the unmet transit needs report. I know there are some folks in the audience here today who would like to speak on transit, and then to consider resolution 2006 regarding the unmet transit needs report and the recommended finding. And then once the board makes a decision on the recommendation, PCTPA staff will submit it to Caltrans, and then we'll start this all over again in the fall. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Beautiful, thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? It's down below.
And you can use this one right here. Use that right here.
I'm good? Okay. So how are the, this is great that you had this kind of response to the outreach. Are the responses communicated back to online or in person to those? So, you know, oftentimes people don't know about things that are available.
Yes. So I'd say it's a combination approach. If folks filled out the online survey or came to the in-person meeting in Tahoe City, they were able to provide contact information. If they provided me any contact information, I'll provide them the final report once it's adopted by the board for them to review. And I do have folks who call in and have a conversation, or folks who are partners with more of our agencies. So sometimes I'll follow up with them on more questions as I do more research into what's going on with their unmet transit needs requests. So it kind of depends, but in general, I try to get back to folks as much as possible.
I have a follow-up question. Where's the button? Right there, okay. Because recently at our seniors or transportation commission, must have been transportation, Mike, you were there, right? There was a woman who works in Mather and wanted to know how she and her colleagues could get there. So it's probably somewhere embedded in here, right?
It depends on when the
And Mike Doer's not here, so.
It depends on when the comment is received. So officially, we only take comments in September and October as part of this official unmet transit needs process. However, because that can be a little tricky for folks to only submit their comments during a couple months, I do save any comments that I come across and it'll get rolled into next year's cycle. So if that comment was received since October, I'll hold on to it and then make sure it gets implemented in the next but that isn't to say I don't talk with the transit operators who we meet more regularly, and if a more urgent issue is coming up, we don't really rely on this annual process as a means to get things done.
Okay, thank you.
I just actually wanted to commend staff. I think up in the Tahoe region, we have 3 regional transportation planning agencies that we work with, and it's really great to have all 3, and we bring in Washoe County, although they're not required to do it, so we get 4 of you there. It's a great opportunity for our general population to talk transit with all of us. So I know you had a great online response as well, so thank you for all the work that you do and helping us coordinate that.
Thank you. Do we have anything else from the board? All right, I'm going to move it over to public comment.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me speak to you today. I wanted to come to you and talk to you a little bit about some unmet transit needs that are in serious need for commuters going to downtown Sacramento from Roseville and points above, such as Colfax, Loomis, Penryn.
I'm sorry, ma'am, could we get your name?
Yes, my name is Jeanette Acrell.
Thank you.
And I'm here to speak to you about this today because I've been doing this commute myself. I'm an East Roseville resident, and I've been doing this commute downtown for 10 years now and never had any issues. Within the last 6 months, ridership has increased tremendously. From Sunsplash, there is a Roseville bus, and there's a Placer County transit bus, and still it is not getting everybody downtown to their jobs on a daily basis. I read the goals of the Placer County Transit, and it's to provide safe and direct means transportation service for Western Placer County residents, to reliable transit service, and we want our passengers to enjoy a comfortable and pleasant ride aboard our buses. This goal is not being met currently. For instance, we stand in line for probably half an hour to an hour, and many people who have monthly passes they've purchased in advance can't even get on the bus. And another issue is there are many people standing in the bus aisles, which is very dangerous. There's nothing for them to hold on to. They have backpacks on. They hit other people in the head with their backpacks. That's the only way they can get to work, so that's the only choice they have, to stand in the aisles of the bus, which is very, very dangerous, and the safety is questionable. I think that Placer County Transit is overselling their tickets on a monthly basis because we go, for those of us that have been commuting for years, we buy our monthly passes. We assume we're going to get a seat, and we do not get a seat. There is a Roseville bus there too. They do pick up some of the excess sometimes, but they are overcrowded as well. We've seen this huge surge in ridership the last 6 months. I'm not sure exactly why it is. It could be partially because of the changes downtown, increase in parking costs, lack of parking, a lot of new people coming down there to work, and they can't afford the parking costs that have gone sky high. There's a lot of reasons for it, but we would really like to request that the board consider adding at least one bus right away for the commuters, and possibly additional buses in the future, because the Placer County is growing, especially in Roseville area. I know I live off Sierra College, and they're planning on building 450 homes on Rockland Road and Sierra College. That's more commuters, and it's just gonna grow tremendously, and already it's not being met. I would like to, I understand Kirk has a record of success. So I'd like to provide you with a petition that I had as many people on my bus sign. Okay.
She'll make sure I get it.
Okay, there's two, and for Bruce, maybe two, because you're in the county then, or in the.
She has to enter it in the record, and then she'll make sure.
And I wanted to show you a picture of the line in the morning that we have to face every morning and often don't get on. We might not get on the second bus, we might not get on the third bus, and it's getting to be very unreliable. And I believe I'm environmentally conscious. I would like to be able to ride the bus and continue to ride the bus like I have been for the last 10 years, but I can't do that if they're gonna make me late. So I just want everybody to see the kind of lines we're facing every morning. Now, it's not just me. I'm here, as you can tell by the petitions I had signed, there are many people that are very upset about this. Because if you're gonna offer a service, you need to offer it. And PCT's selling these monthly passes. So what I would consider to be overselling, because you don't have a seat, and the airlines aren't allowed to do that, so why is the Placer County Transit allowed to do that? I don't know what the fix is. Maybe there's something in coordination with Roseville Transit. Maybe it's a minibus that would be helpful right away. But these people can't be left behind, and they can't be standing in the aisles. So dangerous, and it's crowded and stuffy, and some of the buses lately have been breaking down, which means that they're not providing the service that we need. They're very cordial and very good. The drivers are very helpful, but they seem to have a shortage of buses. And I just wanted to make the board aware that this is a great need, and there are a lot of people using this service, and there will be a lot more in the future. And this needs to be considered right away.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just one little bit of feedback on the comments made by Jeanette, and that is that, in formulating our funding strategy for the South Placer District, two of the top transit needs that were identified were senior transit and commuter transit. And that's why there is a significant line item in those in that funding strategy for expansion of commuter transit for this exact reason, to expand commuter transit, because they are full and very well utilized. And in talking to our regional partners, we also concur that increasing parking cost is driving a significant increase in transit, not just for us, but for other counties in the outlying area of the SACOG territory as well. So this is something that we in the future are planning to address, and why our funding strategy looks at expansion of those commuter services. We are also actively working on expansion of a separate Lincoln commuter bus, as well as a Lincoln circulator bus, a Lincoln Express bus to connect within the county to help address those overcrowding needs.
Beautiful, thank you. Do we have any additional public comment? All right, anything further from the board? All right, do we have a motion?
Move approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Moving on to item M, Executive Director's Report.
Yes, very briefly, a couple updates for you, and some of these we've touched on a little bit already. We are working very hard to reschedule a project tour with Transportation Secretary David Kim, as well as other key Caltrans staff. We are looking now at early May, and we will need, as we asked for before, your active participation at various stops along that route. So we'll be working with you very carefully over the next coming weeks to get that rescheduled. We're also hoping to include additional folks from other legislative offices. We had done that for the prior scheduled tour, but we're doing things like maybe even trying to get Assemblyman Kiley to participate in that tour as well if he is available. So, second thing I wanted to update you on specifically with Assemblyman Kiley is that he has now been appointed to this Assembly Transportation Committee. And so we are going to be working very closely with him as well as Mark Watts to provide him not only information about Placer County and how things work and our needs in Placer County, but also to be a resource to him for other transportation needs on a statewide basis, a local resource. So that's very good news for us that he's on that very, very important committee. The last thing I wanted to, well, a couple other things to mention. One is in the status report in your packet today in tab O, there's a really good update on the Highway 49 project. We have a great team working on this, led by Aaron Hoyt on our staff, and they achieved a very significant milestone of completion of the project report and environmental review for the project. And so that's a very important milestone as we implement this project successfully here up in Auburn. Last thing I wanted to give you is a quick update on the funding strategy. As you know, the March meeting will be fairly focused on the funding strategy and some significant decisions that need to be made regarding the funding strategy will be on that March agenda. We are commencing our next polling on March 5th, which will go probably until about the 17th. Our polling subcommittee will meet on March 23rd to discuss the results of that poll, and then the board again will meet on March 25th with some decisions to be made on whether we move forward on this endeavor. To get us ready for this, we continue a very aggressive focus on outreach. We have remaining activities in all three cities. We have a new our final 8065 video, which is will have a very large focus on public safety and feature our fire chiefs as well as emergency room staff from Kaiser and Sutter Hospital. We have a number of op-eds that are coming up. We have changeable message signs that are now in place in Roseville and Lincoln, as well as mailers. And then one thing we're very excited about is we're doing we've received a lot of questions on exactly how transportation funding works, and as you know, it's a very complicated endeavor. And so we have commissioned, as part of our outreach, an animated video on how transportation funding works. So that'll be coming out here fairly soon before the polling commences. We also have, because of our discussion at the January meeting, we have placed an extra focus on Lincoln, having many different outreach activities, including some open houses at Old Town Pizza that we've, our last one was on February 11th, and we actually had 93 people attend that standing room only event. We have another one planned for tomorrow night, as well as a public safety day at the Joyner Fire Station on Saturday, and then extra mailers and inserts in Sun City Dessert, and other several service club events. So we're very, very active in the proposed South District, getting ready for the polling and then for a decision for the board next month. With that, I'll conclude my report and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? No? Okay, moving on. Do we have any board direction to staff? No? Okay. We have some informational items. Do we have anybody from the public who'd like to speak on those? Thank you. All right, well, with that, we are adjourned.